Welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. Real conversations, brave stories, and simple, soulful insights for therapists and anyone on a healing journey. I'm Sindee Gozansky, licensed therapist, supervisor, and a fellow human figuring it out too. Around here, we believe healing doesn't have to be complicated, and that leading with your heart still matters. We talk about what it really means to be human in and out of the therapy room. You'll hear from therapists, mental health professionals, and people courageously sharing their personal healing journeys. Because whether you're the therapist or the client, we're all human here. Let's keep it simple and keep showing up. Welcome to a Simple Therapy podcast. I'm Sindee Gozansky, your host, and today we are talking about something many people struggle with quietly, the relationships we have with our bodies. And for some people, that struggle can sometimes develop into an eating disorder, which is one of the most misunderstood mental health challenges. My guest today is Pam Skop, LMHC, who understands this both personally and professionally. Pam is the founder of EveryBody Psychotherapy NYC, a group practice offering inclusive, body-affirming care focused on eating disorders, perinatal health, relationships, and life transitions. Pam is a licensed mental health counselor, certified eating disorders specialist, registered yoga teacher, and childbirth educator. In our conversation, we're going to explore what recovery actually looks like in the therapy room, how body image intersects with identity and motherhood, and how Pam built a purpose-led practice rooted in inclusivity. I'm so looking forward to this conversation, Pam. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be here and to talk about all these things and kind of how they come together.
Yes, absolutely. And I think a lot of listeners will see themselves or family members or friends in the struggles we talk about. A lot of therapists will be really interested because many of us who aren't trained in eating disorders are really scared of it for good reason. There's sometimes we need to be scared, but I want you to help debunk some of that so we can help more people.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. As we get started, if you want to check out her website, it's everybodypsychotherapynyc.com. So check that out. And you let me know that you'd be open to talking first about your personal journey, like with body image and your own healing and recovery, and how then that led to doing this work.
Yeah. It's a big part of my story and how I came to this work. So for the majority of my teens and into my 20s, I struggled with an eating disorder, and it was the type of thing that kind of flew under the radar for a long time. It looked different throughout time and showed up in different ways, and it really just wasn't necessarily noticed. I went to therapy at different times, more so for anxiety and social anxiety, but it was never really brought up to the forefront. And I definitely think it was something that got missed in a big way and really just impacted my life. So when I made the decision to really face this and to say, hey, I think this is something that is impacting my life and something I really want to work on, it was definitely challenging to know kind of where to turn. I remember it taking a while to kind of find the right resources and find the right team and everything, because when it comes to eating disorders, we really have a full team approach. And I'm happy to, talk a little bit more about that. But it was definitely a big thing for me to find that team and start to build that team. And then over the years, that journey has taken me many different places for myself, sort of starting out with more relational or psychodynamically based therapy. I've moved in the past couple of years now to doing IFS as a client and bringing that into my work as a therapist as well. So everything that I've been through has really informed the ways that I bring things to my clients and to my caseload.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And I have also that experience when I started working with my own therapist who used IFS, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Started, getting some training. And I love that, we can help others with what works for us. Sometimes it may not work for them, but it's just expanding our range of options, which I think is key to longevity as a therapist.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely having those different tools to bring in. And you're right that not everything's going to work for everyone, but it's great to have a toolbox that has a lot of different tools. And, I like sometimes just say to clients, hey, can we try this? Can we see how this works or if this fits for you or not?
Yes, absolutely. I even say like, would you play with me here for a minute?
Yeah.
um, all right, we're going to try to not go off on too many tangents,
Yeah.
but as you were talking about kind of growing up and that teen, into young adulthood phase where you knew like it wasn't working in a healthy way, but it was under the radar and those things get missed. And I think maybe if you could share even like what are these things that got missed for you that probably are also still getting missed for others?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that really was present and is present for a lot of people, whether it's an eating disorder or disordered eating, is just that constant thinking about food, right? That constant obsessing of like, should I, quote unquote, be eating this or that, or, sort of putting foods into these categories and then kind of dealing with a lot of guilt and shame and negative feelings around anything that happens with food, any meal. There's always so much thought and so much energy that went into that. And I think that, yeah, that wasn't something that was really noticed. When I was a teenager, I went through this period where I really was restricting food and that led to body changes. And I got a lot of positive feedback from that, which we tend to see a lot. So when people are seeing it as sort of this positive thing, they miss what else is going on underneath. So I think the food piece and then the other piece also, which comes in similarly, is the body piece. I definitely spent a lot of time sort of thinking about my body. What was I going to wear? How is it going to look on me? Time really looking in the mirror a lot, which is not uncommon for people with eating disorders or body image concerns. And I definitely tried to keep these things secret, which is also something that comes along often with eating disorders. But I don't feel like anyone, including the therapist I saw over the years, ever asked me questions about it. I make sure when clients come into my office, no matter what they're coming in for, to check in about food and body, no matter what. Because I
Mm-hmm.
think it is, again, something that's really easy to miss.
Fabulous. So, what are some practical questions? Because we want to be able to check in with our clients, almost like add it in as, part of the intake or maybe the second or third session. How do we ask this without, amplifying shame or guilt or
Yeah.
whatever?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think of it similarly as to how I ask questions around sleep, right? Like as clinicians, we're also trained to ask about sleep because these are all things that impact our well-being and our mental health. So some of the questions that I really think are important to ask is, I'll ask a client like, what does a typical day of food look like for you? Or can you tell me what the past 24 hours look like? Right. And even in that, we sometimes get a lot of information because if the client is telling you, but also being like, oh, making comments about how they think about the food, if it's good, if it's bad, whatever labels they might be putting on it. There's a lot of information that can come from that. So even just that sort of basic question about, hey, tell me what the past 24 hours of food looked like for you, can often open up a door around that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And that's really powerful. I mean, even just thinking about it, think of your own internal response. I mean, we're all not immune to this. We need food. We live in this, world of comparison and social culture.
Yeah.
What if there's hesitancy? What if there's, oh, why is she asking me this?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it gives a lot of really good information how people like interact with that. And it's a pretty simple question, right? Like
Yeah.
it doesn't get too deep into feelings or anything. It's pretty factual, but we can learn a lot from that.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you gave a very, well, let's say, hopefully, like not charged analogy with sleep, but it could also be something more charged or taboo, like, thinking about asking our clients about their sex life, their sex or eating. Like sometimes it could be that charged, or, substance use. I can imagine, and you mentioned this too, like thinking constantly about food, in some families or cultures, like that's also really normal. Oh, this is what we're having for breakfast. This is what we're having, the next thing.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that shouldn't be an issue. Or if you ask, like, tell me about the last 24 hours, what you ate, they could say, like, oh, well, you sound like my mother. And then all of a sudden you have some information about family of origin.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's like a good question because based off of the response, I think you get a lot of information around that. And then, it opens up to like more questions, right? Which is essentially what we want that to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, really helpful. Anytime we can bring practical things here, the better. So this is like health. This is like a part of your standard interaction with clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've made it, I've made it a big part of that. I mean, because my specialty is in eating disorders, obviously like I have a big focus on that. But when it comes to my practice and sort of how I teach people to do intakes, that is a piece of it. Is like, we want to ask about all of these sort of things that might feel basic in some ways, but can give us a lot of really rich information.
Yeah. So let's just jump ahead for a second. So let's say somebody, volunteers. Oh, I used to have disordered eating issues, as a kid or in college, and I'm good now. How do you check in about what good means to them or what recovery means to them, and kind of getting a gauge on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's come up many times in clients that I've worked with. Well, they'll come into my office and be like, yeah, this happened when I was a teen and I went through this treatment program and now I'm fine. And what we often discover in our work together is that either they're still struggling or there are aspects of this that they're still struggling with that they didn't realize. So I like to definitely ask about like the history, like tell me about that experience and then bring it to the present, right? So, again, whether I'm asking about food, like what's your relationship to food like now? You mentioned you struggled with this thing when you were younger. Is that still something that you're struggling with? Or how do you view certain foods? Do you label foods as good or bad? Is that something that comes up for you? And another big piece to check in about also is exercise and relationship to exercise, because that can show up in a big way for a lot of people. How often do you exercise? What kind of exercise do you do? How long is a session for you? What do those things look like? And then as we get deeper into it, trying to understand like, okay, where did that decision of, oh, I do X many hours at the gym or this many steps a day, where did that come from? How do we understand kind of what created this idea for you that that's how this is supposed to look?
Yeah. Yeah. And it really takes the judgment off too in this work.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is the biggest piece, right? People carry a lot of shame around all of this. So we, as clinicians, it's so important for us to just be curious and come at it with curiosity.
Yeah. I think people are scared to bring up things like this for fear of being judged. Yeah. And usually it's also serving a purpose, serving some kind of like protective purpose for them. And if we take it completely away, right, that's also terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why IFS is such a great modality for eating disorders, especially a lot of things. But yeah, we're like to recognize, hey, you're not doing this because you're wanting to be in distress or because you're bad, right, in quotes, but you're doing this because it's protecting something. And how do we try to understand what it is protecting and how that's showing up for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That understanding is so key.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some misconceptions? And I don't know if this is like, you want to address it like in terms of in society, like cultural, social misconceptions about eating disorder recovery, or and or therapy misconceptions that are held in the field?
Yeah. I mean, I think both of those are kind of important and there are definitely overlaps. And I will say that right now, we are in a period of time that is really challenging when it comes to food and bodies. You know, we've sort of seen kind of trends over the years, and we're in a period of time where things have moved backwards into, you know, bodies are supposed to look a certain way, and there's a lot of kind of messaging around that. So we're seeing even people who have been through recovery processes or working on their recovery having even more challenges in this moment around that. But I think some of the biggest things that I always like to highlight are that the way someone's body looks is not a representation of whether or not they have an eating disorder. People in all different size bodies can have eating disorders, and most of the time there's some level of restriction to it, right? We often think eating disorders have a very specific look. And unfortunately, I think doctors, medical professionals, and a lot of clinicians think of it that way too. Or they think like, oh, well, if your weight is sort of in the what they might consider the normal range, then you're fine. We don't have to check in about that, right? But it's not a disorder that is weight based. For a lot of people, weight can be a challenge and something that comes up, but it's not a weight disorder, right? It's an eating disorder. We really need to go back and understand the origins of this and not just assume anything about people based on the ways that their bodies look.
Yeah, that's really helpful. So thinking about it from like the eating part first,
Yeah.
and the body comes in, but the body, it doesn't really matter how the body looks on the outside. It's the internal perception.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's how are you relating to your body? And then how are you, you know, either nourishing it or not nourishing it? And again, you know, without judgment, really trying to understand all of that.
Yeah. Pam, what makes these times more challenging? Like what do you attribute that to? And I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's many answers, but what have you seen? Clients come into you and you're seeing it firsthand.
Yeah. I mean, a big thing we're seeing right now is the increase in the usage of GLP-1 medications, which, you know, I truly believe that those medications have really great uses in a lot of ways. But I think when we're purely thinking about it as weight loss, it can be very harmful. So we're seeing a lot more people and representation out there in the world of bodies that used to even be seen as strong and beautiful in certain ways, now looking different. And, you know, people really feeling like there isn't a lot of representation for different size bodies. And I mean, I will say this, I don't know anything about anyone's personal story unless I'm talking to them about it, right? So I do believe that everyone has autonomy to make those decisions for themselves. But as a society, when we're sort of leaning in one direction and we're lacking really representation, that kind of sends a message. And I just see more and more people feeling impacted by that right now.
That's fascinating. So, like the prevalence of using the GLP-1s for weight reduction, diabetes control, all of those things, and they control multiple like physiological issues and diseases. Like, you know, a lot of the doctors say they're miracle drugs because it's not just, you know, one thing. They help with cardiac, all of this. We're not giving medical advice here, but you're saying it's almost like now people see this. They want it for themselves, or if somebody also goes on it and, you know, sometimes there's a certain look, right? Like they get so gaunt and then what?
Yeah.
How does that impact their loved ones and friends too? I'm really curious.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like going to be more we learn about all of this over time and everything. And again, I think these medications are really great for diabetes and some of the other medical issues that they're really helping people with. It's more so that it's really accessible now as just a weight loss tool, and
Okay.
that people aren't getting proper education and understanding of things like side effects or we don't know fully what the long term is in all of this. And again, like then what we're seeing represented in society, and on I hear clients talk about commercials and Subway. They go to the Subway platform and they're inundated with these posters that are promoting weight loss, and that's really where the harm comes in.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. And, it's just really hard. It's really
Yeah,
hard that they're still purporting, right, a certain privileged, smaller body.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And it makes sense, especially with like social media today, that I always talk to my clients about this, like we don't even realize the ways that it kind of gets into our minds with social media, because we're taking in these 15-second clips of something and things start to kind of swirl around in there. So especially with just having access to all of that in such quick ways, it can definitely have an impact.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all of this conditioning that we come up with too, like you
Yeah.
said, thinking about what were you conditioned to do in terms of your exercise, or if you played a sport. And if that was
Yes.
even 10 or 20 years ago, how does that still impact your choices in exercise and in food and so on? Such a fascinating
Absolutely.
topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a huge one. I have clients I've worked with who are, college athletes and now are like in their 30s. And we're still working on understanding the impact of that and how that impacted their relationship to exercise over time.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Somebody who's struggling with an eating disorder, what do you think they wish that other people really understood about what they're going through?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And I think there's definitely a lot there. I think the main thing is to understand like how distressing this experience can be for people, right? Again, it's I think from the outside looking in, people focus a lot on things like weight. And one of the most common things I hear with clients is that feels really upsetting to them when they're in recovery is someone will say to them, "You look so healthy." Right. And that person thinks they're doing something helpful, but they're focusing on the external in that. Right. And again, this is someone who is struggling with their relationship with food and their body in a constant way. These are things they can't get away from. So I think just the understanding that it is more complex than what we're seeing on the outside, and that the 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 process of going through recovery comes with a lot of distress in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Really have to take that to heart. What do we say instead? Instead of "you
Yeah.
look so healthy."
I mean, I think even sometimes just asking people, like, "Hey, how are you?" And I like
Yeah.
truly mean that, right? Or you
Yeah.
mentioned to me that, a couple months ago that you were going through this process. How is that going? If you feel comfortable sharing, how is that going? Right. I think more asking questions
Mhm.
and being curious than kind of like throwing things out there.
Right. Right. And also advice giving. I
Yeah.
know, that can just really, really turn somebody off.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's such a big one we see in our work all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And our personal lives.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, I know. I mean, recently was getting over a surgery. And so I had lost weight and was putting the weight back on. And people were
Yeah.
giving me all this advice. And I was trying so hard.
Right.
And, talk about stuff that it brings back and everything. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm trying so hard. And so I would have loved, I guess, maybe more like, how are you doing? Or
Yeah.
some kind of, encouragement.
Yeah, or even like, how can I support you, right? Like a lot of times
Hmm.
with eating disorders, eating in new places or eating new foods can feel challenging. But if you have friends or family who are like, oh, hey, I want to do this with you, it can feel supportive, right? So instead of, yeah, the advice giving piece, maybe if a friend had said to you, hey, what do you need? How can I show up for you in this process? It would feel different.
Yeah, yeah. I think, it goes to that theme you said of this is really distressing. It's hard. And somebody who's going through this is really trying hard.
Yeah.
They're really, really trying. They're doing this difficult work of going to therapy, of changing their relationship to food, which, they need to survive.
Yes. Yes. I mean, it's
Yeah,
one of the hardest pieces. And I bring this up to clients a lot too. It's not like you can just abstain from food. You need to figure out how to
yeah,
change and shift that relationship.
yeah. Did you know 1 in 5 people will experience a mental health issue this year? That's why I created Mental Health Threads, to spread awareness and break the stigma around mental health. At mentalhealththreads.etsy.com, you'll find a collection of inspiring and fun products, from t-shirts and hoodies to mugs, hats, candles, and more, all featuring positive messages that encourage self-care and mental well-being. Best sellers like Go to Therapy, Love Wins, and Still Here are fan favorites, along with our signature semicolon designs and Pride collection. Therapists especially love our exclusive items like Licensed Listener and Professional Secret Keeper. Our mission is to spark important conversations and remind you that you are not alone. If you're ready to make a statement and support mental health, head on over to mentalhealththreads.etsy.com today. Let's make mental health a priority together. So, Pam, what are some signs then, right? If we don't only focus on weight gain or weight loss, because
Yeah.
again, this is an eating disorder relationship with food, not with the weight itself. What are some
Yeah.
signs of healing and recovery?
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that we might see are definitely related to people having like more flexibility around food. Right. So it might be something along the lines of wanting to try out a new restaurant or trying out new foods, or, finally feeling like they want to, take part in something with a family, like eating birthday cake, whatever that might be. I think also with the exercise piece, seeing someone's relationship to exercise change in terms of them not feeling like, oh, it used to be I had to wake up every day at this time and do an hour at least of this sort of exercise, right? So
Mhm.
really having less rigidity, I think, are a lot of things we can notice around this for people.
Yeah, yeah, that's really key. As you help someone become more flexible, expand this for them. I'm thinking of you also do your somatic work, and how does somatic experiencing therapy impact healing and the therapy process with eating disorders?
Yeah, the somatic work is honestly so important. And that's been also a piece of my journey. I worked with a somatic experiencing practitioner for many years. We still work together.
Oh, nice.
And it's been really cool to see how, again, so much of this is like relationship with body, caring for ourselves, treating ourselves well in a lot of ways. And as a society, we're generally pretty disconnected from our bodies. And when it comes to eating disorders, in terms of that protectiveness, we do see a high level of disconnection from the body. So we're wanting to support people in ways that feel as safe as possible and not too overwhelming, to relate more to their bodies, to understand physical sensations, right? Which also relates to hunger and fullness cues, which can be
Mm.
really shut off for people with eating disorders. Also, just the experience of, yeah, what am I feeling in my body? Can I pay attention to physical sensations that are coming up and how that relates to different things for me, and what happens when I pay attention to that physical sensation? So, especially with eating disorders, because there is a dissociative aspect to it, it can be really important to work on that connection to the body piece.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Um, makes makes such a difference to kind of reintegrate the body for
Yes.
somebody going through this. Do you actually like do yoga or offer yoga through your practice?
Yeah, so I've had it come up sort of in small ways with clients.
Yeah.
It tends to be kind of like an extra thing at times. But I really use my awareness of the body
Mhm.
and understanding the body in certain ways to bring it into the space. When we're doing different work, and I think like IFS is actually a really great resource and use of connecting to the body as well, right? So I think there's a
Right.
lot of different ways we can kind of get into that. That gets to the same key piece of that we have such disconnection to our bodies, and that healing really takes place when we're able to work on the body as well as the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And that just broadens it so much. You don't have to be an expert in somatic experiencing or yoga trained or an IFS expert, but you can bring in pieces of this.
Absolutely.
Even
Yeah.
mindfulness, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, mindfulness is a huge one, right? For so many different things, and especially with eating disorders when it comes to,
Mhm.
what is your experience if you were to sit at a meal and try to be present during that, right? How do we pay attention to what comes up and what information that gives us?
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Or what happens when, your stress level gets really high? What is your instinct? What does your body do?
Yeah. Yeah. How does your
Mhm.
nervous system react in those moments?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So, kind of segueing into your other specialty, which is everything kind of perinatal, maternal health with, pregnancy to postpartum and body and eating and
Yeah.
identity. So maybe just share a little bit about this big, huge topic. It seems to
Yeah.
me that women's, of course, we know they have so many body challenges during this time.
Yeah.
And I just get the sense that it's like there's a lot that's dismissed for women. You're pregnant, like that should be great, and or you have a baby now, that should be great. But what about her body and the relationship with everything else?
Yeah. I mean, this is such a huge one. And I think, something I feel so passionate about because there is a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of lack of support and resources for what women and people who have babies go through during this time, right? So, like, something I always say when I teach about this topic is bodies change in pregnancy. That's a fact, right? We can't get away from that. We don't know exactly what every person's experience is going to be of that. Different bodies will have different experiences, but we do know that a body will change in pregnancy and postpartum. Most people don't fully understand what like a postpartum body looks like, and that it's not that that belly just goes away, right? The uterus is still enlarged. It's still working on things there, and those bellies tend to be squishy, and people tend to look about 6 months pregnant, usually postpartum. Again, not everyone's experience, but most people will experience that. So if we're set up with certain expectations around, oh, I'm not supposed to gain too much weight in pregnancy because that tends to be a big focus. Or my body's supposed to, we hear about like bounce back culture. My body's supposed to bounce back really quickly. People can really struggle in all of that. But also understanding that at the same time, there's so much going on in your body when you're pregnant, right? You are literally growing a human. There's hormonal changes, there's so many physical changes going on. And yet, so much of the focus remains on how things look. And I think it really dismisses other supports that people need. And the same thing postpartum, right? When someone has had a baby, there is a wound the size of a dinner plate in their uterus from where their placenta came out. And we don't really give that much space to think about, wow, that body is healing in a lot of very different ways. What does healing need? What does it mean? And how do we support this person who's going through this major life transition while they're also physically healing? Their body has been through a trauma, but yet they go home and it's like, okay, and now you're not really going to sleep because you have this baby.
Yeah. Yeah. And the wound is usually invisible,
Yes.
which adds to it.
Yeah.
And, I think that the education is just not there, both for usually the women and especially their partners. Right.
Yes.
And so, like it really can create a lot of kind of like suppressed trauma.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of it is like not fully understanding what's happening for someone in pregnancy and postpartum and how much of an experience, like big experience this is. And so, yeah, they're not always really getting the support that they're needing, or it's not maybe fully being seen for what it is.
Yeah. And that common refrain of, the reality that they're disconnected from their body. The body isn't theirs because the baby is, always glommed onto them.
Yeah.
And this is not just for 6 months, this is for a long time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I teach often about perinatal mental health to people outside of the field, like yoga teachers and things. And the way I talk about it is like when I think about postpartum, I really think about the 1 to 2 years following the birth of a baby. Like that is my thought about it in terms of like identity changes and everything. A lot of people don't think about it that way, but I've even heard people say if you have a baby, you're postpartum for the rest of your life. And I like that, right? Like I think there's something really important in thinking about that.
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, that's still how it's charted in the old days, by medical professionals.
Yeah.
So if someone, knows that they've had an eating disorder, disordered eating, or body image issues, and then, they get pregnant, they have a baby, what are some struggles that typically show up for them?
Yeah, there can definitely be a lot of struggles that show up around food at that period of time. Because I think, again, there's so many expectations around their bodies or feeling like their bodies are supposed to get back to something. So even if they maybe felt a little bit more comfortable with where their body was before getting pregnant, it can stir up a lot more in postpartum for people. But at the same time, you need a lot of energy to be taking care of a baby. Also, if your breasts are chest feeding, you need a lot of energy to be able to do that. So there are situations I've worked with clients in where they really weren't able to nourish their body well for different reasons, right? It can also be really hard when you're taking care of a baby to nourish your body well. And that's why we do want to think of like all these, there are really great options out there for quick and easy meals or companies that specifically cater to postpartum and all of that sort of stuff. Like it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but nourishment in this period of time is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are really great ideas, for anybody who has a friend or family member, in that position. That could be something they really need, like just to ease their burden a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a huge thing that we don't always think about. It's like they don't new families don't need necessarily a ton of gifts. They need food. They need, someone to come over and do the laundry. Like those supports are really important.
Yeah. And remember, they're probably not even going to ask for it. So
Yes.
here's your tip. You can make them so happy and do a good deed by helping them out.
Exactly.
I love that, Pam. So nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on this topic? I know it's still like you just in a way take even more care because now you're supporting the mom and the family.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we need as a society again to think about more of how we support pregnant and postpartum people. Like there's just a lot more there. And I think we are talking more about certain topics. And I hear a lot more about people going to pelvic floor physical therapists post birth and like getting more of those things. But it's just such a sensitive, vulnerable time. And even if someone seems to be doing, okay or whatever, we might put on that. I think it's a time we really want to check in on people about everything in their experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one more question around that. And
Yeah.
I can kind of anticipate the answer, but I really want to hear it specifically toward this. So, like for therapists or, providers, doesn't have to be a therapist. What are signs that we might miss that somebody is struggling with, their relationship with food who is pregnant or postpartum?
Yeah. I mean, I think again, it is that sort of like asking the questions sort of thing, right? Like
Yeah.
even with clients that I've worked with for a long time, every once in a while, if we haven't talked about food in a while, I'll ask, what is a day of food? What did you eat today? Right.
Okay.
And I think especially when we're dealing with pregnant and postpartum people, because there are so many needs and this aspect of nourishment is really important. Like that is definitely something I'll check in about. Again, in the same way I might check in about sleep, right? What's going on
Right.
with your sleep, and the expectation never being that they're going to be like, I'm sleeping 8 hours at a stretch, right? Like
Never.
that's not going to happen. But even with the food, talking about, okay, it sounds like you're having a hard time feeding yourself. Is it because you're nauseous? Is it because you don't have time? Like what is coming up there? And how can we think about what the supports are and the resources out there for, quick meals, quick nourishing meals?
Yeah. I love that you bring that up because it's really important for therapists to go a little bit outside the room. You're not doing case management, but you're being a helpful human. How can we think of resources to help you? Like this isn't typically taught in grad schools and everything. So I love that you're saying it, Pam, right? Somebody says, yeah, I don't even know what I ate because I was so tired. And so, okay, great. What can we do to help? What can we put in place?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum, like I like to tell people, like, know resources if you're working with this population at all. Like know what's available, know who's out there in terms of local supports and different things. And even like I said before, there are companies that make specifically postpartum meal support that's really focused on like what people need during that time, and it's a delivery. You got your couple of meals for the week. And just those things can be so helpful.
Yeah. Wow. That's really great. Um, with this, knowing your resources, you have built an amazing resource with your group practice, EveryBody Psychotherapy NYC. It centers inclusivity. You have neurodivergent affirming and queer affirming therapists. You offer relational couples work. You offer specialties. If you go to her website, which is thatwholename.com, there's services for teens, for ADHD, for everything. And wow, you had a vision. What was your big vision to create this practice? Because you're also really young, Pam. So like, kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, yes. I mean, it's, in some ways I've always had the vision, and in a lot of ways I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like as I've been establishing it. But it's interesting because my initial interest in going into the therapy field was actually to work with families of people with special needs. I have a cousin who was born when I was 8 years old, who has Down syndrome, and I remember the process of, even at 8 years old, watching the things that my aunt and uncle and my other cousins were going through. So I always felt a really strong pull to that. So I've always wanted, in some ways, to get more back to some of those roots, which bringing in support for neurodivergent people has felt like a way to really get back into that more. So I've been lucky with kind of the people I've met along the way and different clinicians that have joined the practice and kind of willing to take risks and see where things go. But yeah, it's been really interesting to see the way that this has grown in sort of the areas we're touching into more of. And one of my favorite things that I've done in the past couple of years is created an internship program at the practice too.
Yes, an internship program. I'm so excited to talk to you about that. So that's a lot of work. It's a labor of love. You've got to check out her website because it's very cool. You have like maybe 6 interns.
We have 4 right now. We have 4. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. As someone who supervises interns myself too, like I'm really curious what you think in terms of training this next generation of therapists.
Yeah.
So you're in the heart of that right now. Really
Yeah.
curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, it's one of my favorite things about the practice right now. I think, I've also gotten really lucky with the students that we've taken on over the years. It started out as an experiment a couple of years ago with one student, and I was like, "All right, let's do this." I went to Hunter for graduate school. She was at Hunter. It allowed me to kind of get back in touch with my alma mater and feel like I could give something back to that. So the majority of students, not all of them, but the majority come through Hunter, who we work with at the practice. And it's just been really nice. I think that I remember being back in school and learning certain things. And then I feel like so much of what's happened since I started my private practice is a lot of unlearning to relearn new things.
Yes.
So I've been really open with the interns about those processes and sort of talking about what is feeling good for you. Where are you maybe kind of brushing up against things that don't feel quite in line for you? And it's been really nice to watch them sort of starting to bloom in those ways and question things a little bit, right? I think as therapists, sometimes we got to question things and we need to, think in a different way. So I've really enjoyed kind of opening that up for them and seeing the ways that they respond to that.
Yeah, such a good challenge, especially coming from a lot of these graduate programs where maybe everything isn't completely modern or they're still relying on some, older notions. And then the interns come and they feel like really constrained and restricted. And so I love that you're challenging that.
Yeah, yeah. And it's also been really great because it allows us to meet very different needs in the practice. So our interns see clients at very low fees, which means that we've really opened up the practice to seeing a wide variety of people and being able to touch on, different underserved communities, which has been really nice.
Yeah. Accessibility for mental health services is huge. That's wonderful. And thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think that interns need right now that maybe prior generations of therapists didn't?
Yeah, I think there's probably a different level of support needed, right? I think about how much, I started my private practice. I went full-time private practice just before COVID, right? Which means I was sort of, in some ways it was great. I was in that boom. Everyone was coming to therapy. I think it's allowed me to grow my practice in the ways that it has, but it was really hard to be going through this thing that felt so scary to me and so life-changing to me that I didn't have the answers to, and then supporting people through that. And I think we're just in a time in the world where there's so much going on. There's so much happening and so much we're inundated with in terms of, war and just groups, minority groups constantly, coming under fire, being impacted in different ways. And I just we're living that along with supporting people. So I do think support and the levels of support that we're getting and the openness to those conversations and just being real about, this is hard and we're not going to have the answers. And sometimes just holding that space and being open with our clients about this is really hard. I feel that too. Can be really useful. So I think just the support anywhere that you can get it feels so important.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. That's huge. And it's a good reminder that the amount of support that interns need and other therapists need too. So I encourage anybody who's working with them to really, take a page from what Pam just said, because it's important. We can always add more support. We don't need to take it away. We can always add more support. And if you feel like you don't have it, what does that say, right? For the self, experience, then that means you need more support. So, we're all in this together. One thing you said I just really want to echo, because it's why you're such a great therapist too, Pam, is when you talked about building your group practice, you said, like, I took a bunch of risks along the way.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I tell my interns. You have to take risks. You have
Yeah.
to take risks in our work as therapy. It's not really just sitting in this chair. It can be like, sitting on the edge of your chair and taking a risk by doing a certain intervention or asking a question. So this is all aligned.
Yeah. No, I think that's such a big piece of it. And I'm feeling it a lot myself right now as I'm going through an IFS training, an IFS informed training. And, it's hard to kind of push myself at times to be like, all right, I'm gonna pull us back into using this skill or doing the thing that's not so well known for me and less comfortable. But that's what really helps us grow in this field.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm, so true. Um, you have a big heart that you bring into your work and your practice, and your therapists are really lucky to have you, as are your
Oh, thank
clients,
you.
and you're just doing amazing work. I really want to acknowledge you for that, and for sharing with our listeners, because all of us are eating. You're hopefully, you still have to eat a little bit today and then again
Yeah.
tomorrow, and so we can all relook at our relationship with food.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's a constant for us. So I think definitely like
Mhm.
really thinking about it regularly is important.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Couple closing questions as
Yes.
we wrap up, and then I'd love for you to share with everybody a little bit more details. Um, so, somebody listening right now who's feeling trapped in their relationship with their body or their relationship with food, like, what's a simple message you'd want them to hear today?
Yeah. I think it really just comes back to like you're not doing anything wrong, right? Like this is something that you're struggling with. There's multiple reasons often around that, but you're not doing anything wrong. You're going through something hard. You're going through a hard time, and that doesn't make you bad. It just means that's where you're at right now.
Mm, yeah, thank you. Um, And for therapists, we're trying to
Yeah.
be even more thoughtful and intentional when we work with clients with these issues. What would you hope that we would carry with us into the therapy room?
Yeah, I think curiosity, I know I said that before, it really comes back to that for me. Like I really try to approach most of my work with curiosity and encourage my clients to approach things with curiosity. But I think, yeah, how do we as therapists enter the space and just try to be curious and open to what someone is going to share with us instead of maybe coming in with our own very strict agenda or feeling like, oh, I have to solve this thing in this way. Just having that curiosity really opens up the space for great conversation.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. I know one of my big takeaways is going to be just remembering that it's so distressing. Somebody
Yeah.
who's dealing with this, it's distressing. They're thinking about it all the time. Like you
Yeah.
said, doesn't show. They're thinking about it all the time. And we can ask, it's okay to ask, what has your eating been like in the last 24 hours? Like, let's just
Mhm.
bring that in and normalize
Yeah.
it. So, thank you for those tips. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
of
it.
course.
Yeah. Um,
Absolutely.
Pam Skop, tell everyone more about your practice, how they can connect with you, all of your social medias.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are, as Sindee said, we're EveryBody Psychotherapy NYC. We're mostly virtual practice based out of New York. I used to live in New York City. I now live in the Catskills, so I am no
Oh,
longer local to the city.
wow.
But we do have two in-person locations. We see people one day a week in a Flatiron location, and then we also have a Brooklyn location as well, where people can come in person. As you mentioned, we do eating disorders, perinatal mental health, neurodivergence, relational trauma, and LGBTQIA are really some of the biggest things that we focus on. And some of the clinicians in the practice are queer and non-binary, and identify as many different identities, which is, I think really important for a lot of people. And we are always trying to run groups. So keep checking back on our website for anything that might be coming up around that. Um, So we have our website, everybodypsychotherapynyc.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Everybody Psychotherapy NYC, as well as Instagram at Everybody Psychotherapy NYC, where I'm constantly trying to do more reels and different things there. I also
your
have
Instagram is great, by the way.
I also have it's more of a personal professional page called Peaks and Tranquility Therapist. So you can check me out on Instagram there as well. And I'm always happy to connect with anyone, whether you're looking for resources for yourself, if you're wanting to start therapy, if you're a student and you have questions, just always really happy to talk to people in the field and connect.
Oh, that's great, Pam. And you have multiple states that you're licensed in, right?
Yes. So I'm licensed in also New Jersey and Pennsylvania. One of my other clinicians is also licensed in New York, New Jersey, and we have one clinician in Colorado as well.
Yeah, fabulous. That's great. And do you do consultations with other therapists who might want, to bring this into their practice or case consultation type of thing?
Yes, absolutely. I love to, be able to talk about this more and to support more people in learning about how to navigate eating disorders, perinatal mental health, and all of that. So always happy to, I'm very open to those experiences and anyone who's interested in consultation.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And thank you for all of your generous time and wisdom today. And just really taking, some of the shame in even talking about this topic off. It just feels like, wow, we had such a natural conversation about eating disorders and body image. Thank you for that, Pam.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was so great, Sydney.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. And until next time, remember to keep it simple and keep showing up. Thanks for listening to A Simple Therapy podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, please subscribe, leave a review, or share it with someone who needs it. Your support means so much. You can learn more or get in touch at asimpletherapypodcast.com. And remember, let's keep it simple and keep showing up.